Welcome. From virtual galas to walk on your own time peer-to-peer fundraising events, delivered to your home gourmet meals and Zoom challenges, 2020 has redefined fundraising. Today's webinar will examine how fundraising and membership association events have changed because of the COVID restrictions. Our panel of experts will also share their thoughts and advice for the future. I'd like to welcome Penny Banks, Executive Director at Dunnville Hospital and Healthcare Foundation and a professor at Fenshawe College. Also, Hala Bissada, owner of Hala Inc, Toronto's premier and most award-winning management company. And Fred Fox, the manager of supporter relations at the Terry Fox Foundation. This webinar is the third in a series of webinars from the Resilience 2020 project, which was created to seek input from charitable nonprofit sector representatives who will share their experiences, challenges, and perceptions with their colleagues. We want to know how best to carry on in the short term, in the medium term, and of course beyond 2020. So we're looking for everyone's input. Let's start with the most obvious question. How are things going? I've heard a range of results, from $1 million breakfasts that were held in offices and small groups spread throughout the city, to on your own pledge events that have only reached about 25% of last year's goal. Fred, this is the 40th anniversary of the Terry Fox run. How are things at Terry Fox?
You know, I think we're doing really well. We're really proud of how Terry Foxes across Canada have responded. It is the 40th anniversary, and you know, we started working on the celebration of Terry's Marathon of Hope, the 40th anniversary, a year ago after our Terry Fox run last September in 2019. And of course, COVID hit, and we closed our 9 offices across the country, and everybody was working at home. And so back in March, early April, we were trying to figure out what we were going to do in September. September 20th was the Terry Fox run for this year, and it was our supporters, our donors, our volunteers right across Canada saying, you know, we've got to keep this going. You can't cancel. And so we made the decision around April 12th, the 40th anniversary of when Terry started the Marathon of Hope, and it's been awesome. The engagement through our social media platforms, keeping everybody involved. We've had a couple of events in the summer, the Terry Fox Trek. Normally we're climbing up Mount Terry Fox, which is in British Columbia near the Alberta border, and we did that virtually this year. And then we had the Terry Fox Ride of Hope, and then last weekend on the 20th of September, the Terry Fox Run, and people right across Canada were engaged. We're doing good. Right now we're working with our schools. Schools across Canada are still planning on doing their Terry Fox events. So I think we're really excited about, you know, the path that we're taking so far.
Oh, that's excellent. I do have to say that I've heard more about the Terry Fox Marathon of Hope in advance of this year's, like you said, all over the summer till now. And I was just reading an article in the local newspaper about how the school, the local high school, is doing a virtual event around the track on their own time. So that was good to see. Penny, tell me what's been happening in Dunnville.
Well, it's a small community, so unlike the work that Fred's doing across the country, we're sort of trying to fundraise for our small community hospital. We're a town of 6,000 people, and you know, just really trying to figure out how we move forward in all of these times. One of the great things that we've been able to do is we found out this morning that Dunnville was #1 in Canada again for the 3rd year in a row for the Smile Cookie campaign. So our little town of 6,000 people raised close to $63,000 in a week, and it was the hard work and dedication of really one employee in our office and a handful of volunteers. Well, not a handful, probably 100 volunteers who all, you know, wanted to pitch in and help out in a new social distancing world, and the community just, you know, jumped on. Huge support from the community. So one of the little things that we're doing in our small little town here.
Thanks, Penny. I like the fact that you're working with a corporate sponsor and there was an increase over previous year's revenue. That's something that should really be heartening to our viewers. Now we've heard from a large national perspective. That's a long-term event. and something that was really focused over the course of 1 week. But Hala, I know you've done a lot of international events, and some of them aren't even fundraising events. So what has been your experience over the last several months? And I know you were doing a big event last Friday. So how did that go?
Yeah, it's been actually really challenging for our industry. Me and my fellow special event people that have their own firms in the industry. So we spent the first part of the year really rescheduling most events to 2021 or canceling them even. I think the majority of my clients are waiting till January 2021 to really make some big decisions. But in the meantime, some of my clients have decided to move forward with their events virtually. So we just completed an event for UNICEF Canada, which took place just last week. It was a 2-day conference, and it was actually really quite successful. It was a cultivation event for 100 donors, and they had the ability to partake in various sessions from different groups across the country representing UNICEF Canada and talking about their various programs, hearing from an ambassador and a minister, etc. And it was very engaging. It was still a great opportunity to come together. Currently, we're working on an event for Ryerson University. We're launching their Faculty of Law, and we've put together a virtual celebration. It's a 1-hour broadcast. So there are really interesting, unique ways to bring events to life virtually these days. A lot of various platforms out there that you have access to. It's about figuring out which format and which platform works best for whatever it is that you're doing. And I think the biggest thing is educating my clients not to be afraid to look at this as an option. It can actually even sometimes be a better option for certain clients, especially if they're a national or global organization, because it's a more sustainable, more inclusive way to bring an event to people.
That's an interesting point. Now, you mentioned that these events are live as well as virtual. Does that present any challenges that it wouldn't when you're in person?
Actually, it does. So what we tend to do is normally recommend to do what we call semi-live, where some sessions or segments are pre-taped and some are live, or you have a pre-taped segment with a live Q&A. Sometimes broadband can be an issue. So for example, with UNICEF Canada, their delegation in Bolivia, it was a little bit challenging because of their broadband. That's one of the things that you have to look at, is whether or not they have the bandwidth to do something virtual, or get around it by perhaps pre-taping it and still including it as part of your overall show.
Okay, great. I know technology and the ability to use the system and internet connections are a challenge for nonprofit and profit businesses as well. Is that, Penny, you're in a small town, is that something that's relevant to you?
Absolutely. One of the things that we're always trying to think of different ways and different events that we can do that can be inclusive for our entire community. And because we're a small hospital foundation and we're rural, we have there are many of our donors and our event participants who wouldn't have access to the type of internet capabilities that they would need for us to put on more virtual events. Our donor demographic is maybe not the most tech savvy group of individuals. So are they going to be afraid to go online and go to a meeting or attend a virtual gala? Not only is it accessible to them, but even for a small foundation like this, what types of costs are involved in purchasing licenses for software and GoToMeeting or WebEx or those sorts of things?
Fred, you mentioned specifically that it was really your volunteers who came together and pushed you to keep going and do the right stuff. How has virtual volunteering affected Terry Fox?
It's been amazing. We communicated with our volunteers and said, like, we need you more than any other year we've needed you to be there for us. And we've got 800 communities, large, small towns and big cities like in Toronto, that participate in the Terry Fox Run, and they came on board and organized within themselves. Now, we weren't asking people to gather like we normally do at big run sites. We were saying to people, to our volunteers, to participants, who said, do your run the one day your way. So, virtually get together with your personal little bubble, front of your home, go through the neighborhood, gather with friends in your bubble, whatever you want to do at the local park. And our volunteers were all over that, and they were communicating. We've got a Facebook page that all our volunteers, our run organizers can exchange ideas with, and they're always communicating and supporting each other. And they've been really, really engaged this year. We created an app this year through Mood Spring, and for the Terry Fox Run, people follow themselves right across Canada, hitting different milestones that Terry might have hit, or where there's a statue in Thunder Bay or in Vancouver. So we kept them very engaged. It's been pretty awesome.
Well, it sounds like everybody's learned something. Hala, I know you've been saying that your clients are a little bit different than fundraising clients, and they're different, of course, than Penny's and Fred's clients. So what are you planning from now until Christmas? Today's Yom Kippur, and there's a whole bunch of events from now until New Year's that generally I'd be attending. I've been invited to some virtual stuff, and I know my wife and son are both doing virtual Zoom challenges for different charities. What's going to happen with you and your clients from now until Christmas?
Well, you never know, like, some last minute opportunities always sometimes arise, but really I feel that virtual events do take some planning. It's not something that you can necessarily do last minute. I mean, it depends on how complex they are, but I wouldn't necessarily say that you can, whip them up in a couple of weeks. I mean, certain ones you can. I think you need to take the time to plan it. I think for the rest of the year, if they haven't already been, or if they haven't already been in the planning process, they likely won't happen until 2021. But I think what people are looking at is waiting to see what the numbers are going to be like for gathering, because I think one of the key things that is going to come out of this is that you're going to see a lot of what we call hybrid events, where it's a combination of both live and virtual. I do have one gala potentially happening in November, the end of November, but as for Toronto anyway, I mean, the numbers went up to 50. They were supposed to go to 100, then they went back. Now they're back down to 10. So, and our numbers are spiking again in Toronto. So, honestly, it's really hard to predict what the live component's going to be. You literally need to play that by ear. But what you should be doing, likely, if you want to move forward with your events, is planning it virtually, still planning the live, but knowing that it actually might be completely virtual as opposed to a hybrid. And I think what the most important thing in terms of virtual, because a lot of us are kind of zoomed out and that kind of thing, is finding really unique ways to engage the audience. So to give you an example, for UNICEF, they were supposed to be in New York for their conference. There was supposed to be 2 days in New York. So what we did was we used New York as a theme to implement some fun activities. So, for example, during the lunch break, they did a virtual tour of Central Park, and during their cocktail reception, we did cocktails at the Met. And then we did a live virtual tour with the Guggenheim, which was really fun. So we had one of their educators walk our guests or our attendees through a virtual tour of the Guggenheim. So there are things that you could do that are really custom to what your event is and who your event is and what theme you have. You just have to think a little bit creatively, and there's a lot of people who put a lot of thought into how to kind of pivot to virtual. And if you look at all the museums, even here in Toronto or across the country, they all have virtual tours now. You can customize with one of their educators. You can have it themed specifically on maybe a specific theme and those kinds of things. So there are lots of fun ways to customize.
Oh, that's great. I really like the idea of customizing and using their own platforms to enhance what you're doing. It makes everybody feel like they're doing something special.
Now, I think that one of the gaps that we found was that a lot of the platforms weren't really interactive. So, if you used something that we call it a 2D environment versus a 3D environment, So one of the things that we developed was a 3D virtual tour so that we could create any 3D environment. It was really much more interactive because we really saw that we were really limited with 2D environments on some of these platforms. So with technology being the way it is and things like extended reality, augmented reality, virtual reality, there's so much more we can do online. And it's a little bit scary, and for some it's cost prohibitive, but it'll be interesting to see how people use those new technologies to create a more exciting guest experience.
That's a really good point that, you'd mentioned that some people are zoomed out, and so the 4 square or 6 square or 8 square events, they're probably going to run their course very soon. So having those unique technologies. Penny, from now until Christmas for you, how are you engaging your volunteers and your donors at a more local level?
We're very lucky. We are a small community. We have an excellent relationship with all of our media partners as well, and we have a strong presence on social media. We keep all of our donors and our volunteers engaged through those areas. We also are continuing with events. This past week we had our golf tournament. It was quite easy to host this event, keeping social distancing guidelines. It was a public facility, so in a golf course, so we were still able to have 100 people, but just managing expectations and messaging is the best way for us to sort of communicate that. And we are having a walk. Our walk is planned for October 17th, and we've had to obviously take it virtually and just taking advantage of some different software platforms where we can encourage people to do some peer-to-peer fundraising. We're so lucky in this small community, and I think that I speak not just for our community, but for all small town communities that have not-for-profits trying to figure out a way to navigate through this new I don't like saying new normal because it's not normal in any way, but I think that for all of us all of my counterparts in these small not-for-profits, we count on the community. We're very fortunate that they give and they participate because they have a passion for, the charity that they're donating to or the event they're participating in. It's not incredibly difficult to continue to raise money, but we just have to sort of look at how do we do that now. And so if we modify an event where we have half our golfers come in the morning and half come in the afternoon and they line up out at the road and you can't come in till the morning golfers are out. So those are things that they're unfortunately used to now. And so going forward in the next 3 or 4 months, we're just going to think of the best way to host our virtual walk. And Fred, I might be reaching out to you after this to figure out the best way to do that. And then Christmas, the next biggest challenge for us is we always do a tree light up ceremony. And I'm sure many communities do it where, you buy a string of lights, donation comes to the hospital and everybody gathers and watch the lights come on the tree, and it's going to be a challenge to figure out how do we do that and how do we encourage people to still support. But regardless of how we decide to do it or come up with it, I know they'll be there because they strongly believe in our hospital, and I think it's similar everywhere you go. I guess to answer your question, we just keep moving forward and think a little bit outside the box and listen to your volunteers and your committee members, because everybody has ideas and ways that they can do things differently, and that's working for us. So that's how we will move forward.
Good. Fred, you talked a lot about your volunteers and people taking pictures at different iconic spots in Terry's journey. How are you planning to celebrate the success of your participants and your programs over the next couple of months?
Yeah, but September is really big for us, of course, with the run community events that happened a week ago. Right now, we're working with our schools, and the schools have really had to be creative this year in what they're doing. We're asking them to do more fundraising online that they've never done before. The students, asking them to create their own fundraising pages that they've never done before. Usually the kids are bringing in money and loony drives, whatever they're doing. So that's still happening. We're going to be celebrating for the next couple of months and communicating with our volunteers, sending thank yous. Our offices are really good in regards to thanking our volunteers, thanking our participants, and we're still working out those kind of plans and what we're going to be able to do. We try to get together with some of our volunteers, and in as Penny was saying, in a normal situation, it's not normal. And we had a great celebration on the 20th after the Terry Fox run at 4 o'clock Eastern time. We brought all of our volunteers together on a Zoom call. We had about 300 people on the Zoom call, celebrating a day that was so different. And we'll probably do that again a couple more times before Christmas, and bringing everybody together, celebrating their success and what they did in making the 40th anniversary a success. Although unique and different, we want them to know that, again, like I said at the beginning, we needed them more than any other time we've ever needed them.
If I'm planning an event, Christmas event, something in December, whether it's a virtual gala or, a snowshoe walk, something like that. If you could each give me just one piece of advice that, you've only got a couple of months. I know you're going to change your event to virtual or not virtual, other than, make sure you've got connections, properly on your, through the internet companies. What's a good piece of advice you can let people have?
Expect the unexpected, I guess. Be prepared for anything. You just never know. Like for example, we woke up one day and all of a sudden the government was saying, okay, only 10 people. So regardless of how you plan your event, what you need to do is be prepared for something to change. We're so it's so unfortunate that we're in the time that we're in right now, and you can plan all sorts of things, but you never know what's going to happen with the way that the pandemic is going right now. You could be planning for something at Christmas and we could be in a full lockdown by then. So my biggest piece of advice would be just, plan for anything.
I think that's good advice in terms of what Penny's saying. We just don't know what our numbers are. So it's almost like you have to have a plan A and a plan B and even a plan C. But from a virtual perspective, if you're already undergoing that planning process for virtual, that's not going to change. I mean, you can't, it's the live component that will change, that you have to be a little bit prepared for. I think you have to just, for me, it's always choosing the right format, the right platform for the audience that you're intending to engage, and just making sure that it's on point for whoever it is you're delivering the event for. There's some really fancy stuff out there technology wise, but you don't need it for certain events. So just be conscientious of just choosing what's best suited for the event that you're working on.
Great suggestions there. And I think that's what we've had to do with, especially with our school events, this month. Back in June, what were schools doing back in June? And we were trying to plan around that, and whether, half the school was in, or they were only going to school 1 or 2 days a week, and then waiting all summer to really see what schools were going to do. And we had probably plan A, B, and C all ready to go, depending on what the schools were doing, what province, what school boards, different school boards were doing. So we've been really, every day we were moving the yardsticks a little bit further, and what we were allowed to do and what schools were willing to do as well. So I think a good would be just be prepared to change and be able to do whatever it takes to help other people out. We're here to make it easy for everybody to organize the events that they're doing.
What do you think we can predict for next year from an event perspective?
What we're looking forward to is that everybody's going to be gathering together like they normally do. But if that doesn't happen, we're ready. We know what we've had to do this year, and we're going to learn from our mistakes and learn from our successes as well. If we have to go virtual and do things as we did this year. So we haven't really talked too much yet about the 41st, but we know we're going to be prepared. We're always prepared for a normal situation, and people are going to, looking forward to gathering again. But if we're not able to, I think, we've learned a lot from this past 6 or 7 months, and what people are willing to do, and how they want to stay engaged.
I think for us, we're fortunate in that a lot of the events that we do, there's not a huge amount of time involved in the planning, and we repeat our events are annual, so we can build off of this year and anticipate what might happen next year. I think one of the big challenges for us is going to be fear of people wanting to participate. And we are a small community. When I was driving into work today, the lineup to the drive-through COVID testing center was literally a mile long. So, there's that challenge that people are going to be, I think that would be our biggest challenge, is that people are going to be afraid to participate in anything because they just don't know. Now, fortunately for us, we're not, we don't have any outbreaks where we are, but that would be something that we would kind of have to plan for. But from the college perspective, the biggest thing is learning, and I think Hala, your experience here would be valuable, because we've been teaching events the same way for so long, and then all of a sudden, I'm teaching a class, and my particular class is sponsorship, the public relations, that sort of thing, and we're teaching them the sort of the same stuff that we've been doing all along, and all of a sudden, not only are we not in class anymore, not having group discussions, our classes are online, and we're trying to figure out what that looks like, and we're trying to navigate technology, and how do you teach a course that's about building relationships over a computer. So I think that looking into incorporating some of the new technologies into the courses that we're teaching at the college is going to be very relevant moving forward, because I mean, Hala is proof that that's sort of the way that events may or may not have to go in the future. So particularly if you want to have backup plans. So I think that just being open to new technologies is something that we're going to have to look at moving forward in our event planning program.
I honestly don't think a live event will come back to the way we've, for me, a lot of my galas are 300 person up galas. That's not coming back anytime soon. Like I'm thinking not till 2022, to be quite honest. By the time they sort out having a vaccine and it gets distributed and tested and all those different things, we have to be vigilant in terms of ensuring that our numbers aren't spiking and all the rest of it. First and foremost is health and safety for our communities. So that being said, and that's why it's so devastating to the hospitality and the events industry. For Penny, in terms of teaching, she's going to have to teach a whole new, like for a veteran like myself, I feel like a little newbie. Like I'm now having to pivot and learn a whole different way of executing an event. It's very technology based. There's so many platforms out there that you can utilize, and it gets overwhelming. And not only that, they're coming out every day. I mean, every time I turn around, there's a new platform, and you're trying to figure out if it's worthwhile or if it's not. Is it expensive? Is it fit within someone's budget? And some of these bigger technologies are just cost prohibitive for most people. Things like augmented and virtual reality, it's just not going to happen for most. So I think when you plan a virtual event, you also have to use a different lens in terms of how you plan for it. I think programs need to be a lot shorter with more breaks. So it's harder to jam pack, like when you're doing a conference and when you're in person, you might, have it run from 9 to 5. That gets really exhausting for someone who's watching it online. So when you're planning a virtual event, you also have to start thinking about it from a different lens, even in terms of engagement. So looking for really interesting ways on how to engage and be creative. A lot of planners are doing what's called an event in a box. So they're sending something really fun that lands in the guest's lap ahead of time, whether it's a cocktail kit or ingredients for a cooking demonstration, or different fun little things that you use throughout the event. And so you've given them all the tools they need in terms to engage during the event. So there's a lot of room for creativity here, but as they say, you got to think outside the box. I think we're going to just see a lot of creativity is what we're going to see next year, because you got to figure out how to engage them and create a guest experience when you don't have that one-to-one anymore, like that in-person experience. You don't have all the senses, you don't have touch and smell and all of those different things.
One of the reasons, I like to go to events is I get to meet people that I not always get in contact with. people I haven't seen in a long time. How do we have as an industry a responsibility to connect our supporters with each other as well as themselves and with our own organization? Or is that something that we're going to have to just let slide for the next little while?
There's lots of networking activities and tools even on these platforms to connect people. I mean, they're built for that, whether it's having private chats or group chats or moving into a breakout room and having a discussion, on a particular topic. You still want that kind of engagement virtually. It's just how do you execute it in a way that makes it a little bit more fun for those who are attending. And so, for example, the Guggenheim tour, that was for 30 people. They had a really fun opportunity to speak one-on-one with the educator, talk amongst themselves, and what did you think of this building? How does it inspire you? And all these, and they had a full-on discussion as a group about the Guggenheim. So there's ways to do it.
When I was speaking a little bit earlier about the teaching experience, from the other perspective, not just about how the course curriculum may have to change, but the delivery mode. So we went from in class to online just when COVID hit. And it was interesting the way my students in my second semester, not one of them would go online. Like they were online to learn, but would not turn their cameras on. So I had full-on classes every week of these students texting me. Nobody wanted to, but if we, as Hala was saying about these, sort of go into a virtual classroom or breakout sessions, I'd pop into a breakout session and they all were talking to each other with their video on. So it's interesting to see how one demographic, like those are students, how they're comfortable with each other, but in an environment where there's more people, maybe, I have to learn as a professor, I have to learn how to engage them to get them. Even bonus marks wasn't getting them to turn their computers on. And I think it goes back to what you guys were saying about, sort of the virtual getting boring or being too long. Absolutely, we need to figure out ways that, and for us in small communities, and if we're looking at our donors and our volunteers, making it a rewarding experience. And I think, Fred, you might find this too, is that your volunteer base is not one demographic. It's not all high school students and it's not all retired individuals. There's the whole demographic of, volunteers from 7 years old to 70 years old. And how do you make sure that the experience that you're providing them is good for all of them or meets what they're looking for, like is, they're getting out of the volunteer experience what they want. And so it's just going to be incredible to see how all of this unfolds over the next 18 months for sure.
No, and it's true. Our demographics of Terry Fox Run organizers in various communities across Canada, it varies. We've got people who have been organizing their Terry Fox Run in their community for 35 years. So they're likely in their 60s, 70s, maybe in some cases we've got 80-year-old Terry Fox Run organizers. When it's been the last 6 to 7 months, when we've been trying to engage them virtually through Zoom calls and asking them to do something a little bit different, they've really been uncomfortable with that. And so we have looking ahead to next year, if we're doing this again next year, to engage them so we don't lose them.
That's true. I think not wanting to lose your supporters, especially of a specific demographic or a specific type of individual who may not want to connect in the same way, or they're looking for something that virtual doesn't offer. But now I want to talk a little bit about the professional staff because, well, the people who are going to be watching this are those in the business. So other than having computers that can host 9 or 10 different applications for virtual conferencing and being a sound and lighting technician, so that you don't have the glow on the side of your face and all those other fun things that we're going to have to do as fundraisers now. What are some of the skill sets that we're going to have to learn in the upcoming months to make 2021 successful? Hala, you were laughing, so I'll ask you first.
I'm just laughing because I think I do have at least 10 different type of online platforms on my computer right now, and you never know, is it going to be Zoom or Google Hangouts or GoToMeetings or whatever it is. For me, it's also just the engagement is the big thing. Like coming up with innovative, creative ways to engage people so it's not the same old thing. Like we see a lot of the same things happening online, even for entertainment and, for mixologists mixing a drink or having a virtual photo booth and things like that. I think we have to think even more creatively and beyond that, which can also be challenging, but it's a whole new world. And I don't know, you either got to pivot and face it, or, very sadly, a lot of my fellow industry people have had to close shop, and it's very, very sad. And it's the reality of what's happening here. And I feel, a little bit blessed that at least we're trying to pivot, and we'll see what happens.
We've been pretty fortunate that even before COVID, we had the ability for staff, if needed, to work from home and access files from home and everything else that would be on the server at the time or the cloud, and so able to work from home. So I think everybody, even now that they've been at home for 6 or 7 months, they've been, it's been fluid. You're dealing with people who are really concerned with some of our staff and how they're making out on their own, and not having that contact with other staff like they would in an office, and those are concerns we're thinking about. But I think we're moving along really well, and we have an all staff call once a week on Zoom, and there's about 40 of us across the country, 45 of us across the country, and we get together and let it update what everybody's doing. Even personally myself, just in this last week, I've done GoToMeeting, Google Meet, Team, presenting to schools or corporations and what they're doing. So it's changed me, what I'm doing a little bit more. I don't think all of our staff across the country are dealing with that as much, but it's challenged me to make sure I've got all the different platforms on my laptop to communicate and do my work, for sure.
Penny, looking at it from the two perspectives you have, from probably a very, if I know my statistics, a very elderly audience who are your major donors and annual donors, and the students you're teaching. How are you going to keep both of those groups engaged next year?
If I could speak first about our donors, I think the biggest thing that we have to look at is it's challenging in a world where you're self-isolating, talking behind masks, if you're able to get together. It's hard to continue to steward your donors in the way that you would like to. If you can't, like, I can't just go meet a planned giving prospect for tea in her house, those sorts of things. So making sure that over the next 18 months, we're able to find ways to steward our donors and thank them for coming on board, especially over the last sort of 6 or 8 months. We've been very fortunate here in our small little hospital foundation to be able to continue to raise the same type of money that we have been. So I think that's going to be sort of the biggest challenge, is figuring out ways that we can make our donors feel appreciated, and so that they continue to support us. From the professor teaching side of it, man, I got to learn how to use those online platforms a lot better, because I hate staring at my own face, and especially I need to figure out a way to engage those students so that they're, they want to come to class and participate and have fun. Now, that being said, I have to give kudos to the Fenshawe, because they are consistently looking at ways, and probably not just Fenshawe, all of the colleges and universities out there looking at ways to provide online learning opportunities and improving the quality. Like, we went from Bongo at the beginning, which was pretty basic, to using WebEx now at the college, and there's always opportunities. They're providing us with all of these, online learning opportunities for the profs, so that we can then provide engaging opportunities for the students. So I mean, definitely over the next 18 months, I'm going to be learning how to get my students to want to participate, so I can at least see them. I went through a whole semester and didn't see one student's face, which I thought, for me, I got to find a way to engage them better. So.
Yeah, I can see that. When you look at it from that challenge, and even from a management point of view, motivating and managing a virtual team is different than working with someone who's in your office. We've talked about learning to use student peer-to-peer work rather than them listening to you, Penny. So that's good. I've been doing a lot of these online sessions, and it's pretty easy to lose the audience. And I think we've got a great conversation going, but we've been online for about an hour now. So I'd just like to say thank you to all of you. You've given me some things to think about and have really reinforced a number of the things that I've been reading about while I was preparing for this session. And of course, you've given me some great ideas. So thanks. You've been able to pivot. You've had some real success. And I hope that as we move forward with the Resilience 2020 project, we can count on your support to keep going. But I'd like to ask each of you for just one final word.
One of our advantages, we believe, is the Terry Fox story that's kept people engaged. And you know, through all of that we've dealt with COVID, there's still people out there with cancer and being diagnosed with cancer, and that's kept people so involved because they've remembered somebody that they've lost with cancer. So this opportunity to talk about our successes, this 40th anniversary of a celebration, even in the most difficult times we've ever faced, it's been an awesome opportunity. So thank you.
I think I sort of can just echo what Fred said about it just being a unique time, and this has been a great opportunity. The past 8 months has been certainly a challenge for all of us, but it never ceases to amaze me, the generosity of our volunteers and our donors out there. These events would never happen. We wouldn't even be having these conversations about what do events look like in 2021 if we didn't have the volunteers and the donor support that we have. So I'm very grateful for that, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to have the job that I have. And here's hoping that 2021 looks a little bit different than 2020, that's for sure.
Hala, the final word belongs to you.
I just say, for everybody, be kind to each other, be patient with each other. If someone needs to talk to you, be there for them. Or if you need to talk to someone, because it's so easy to crawl into a hole and hide away. And it's such a scary time for so many people. I think the more we communicate and the more we share and the more we just open up about and be real about what's happening, I think that would be, I think it'll help overall. So that's, for me, it's really mostly about being there for each other during this really difficult time.
I'd like to thank you all. Really appreciate you helping us out, and looking forward to our next conversation.